Alright, so this is part 2 for Melee. If you want Smash 64, go to the first part. Here's the roster, if you're only interested in that. But yeah, so Melee had 8 unique newcomers, and with those newcomers came 2 really great mechanics. And I still want both these ideas realized, but I don't necessarily agree with the choices for the characters who got them. First, the easier of the two, the transforming character, Zelda Sheik. Going through the roster, I really like the idea of having Goron and Zora Link switch with the different masks from Majora's Mask. There's actually not a lot of games between these two Smash games, so that is one of the few. I'll admit I'm not the biggest fan of Majora's Mask, although that's another one I want to give another shot at some point, but I could sort of at least appreciate the premise or the unique twist on what they sort of started with Ocarina of Time and the tone of the game. And I think this is a great way to bring in 2 of the unique species from The Legend of Zelda who also have plenty of moveset potential in a way that makes sense. I did consider a few other transforming characters, but this was definitely the idea that I just really liked when I came up with it and stuck with it. The other idea was the duo character, which we got through Ice Climbers. This was a tougher spot to fill. What I wound up coming up with is Slippy and ROB 64. I figure, Slippy is kind of a joke character. He is the smallest of the Star Fox group. He got into some trouble a little more out of the Star Fox group. So I can see him benefiting from some backup. I feel like ROB 64 could be sort of repurposed and resized to fit this role. Admittedly, this is a bit of a stretch, but at the same time, this was sort of the best idea I had, and I think it could work. It's good enough. It still gets the concept I wanted to get out there. So after that, from base roster, I decided to introduce 2 additional series, and my rare bias is going to show. Now, you might be thinking, what about the rare buyout? That is a good point, but I think you can sort of make an argument that rare content could have made it to Melee, and I'm just going to ride with that. With sort of the biggest argument being is that the announcement of the rare buyout happened in September of 2002, but Melee was released in 2001, and even in its last region, it was released in May before the September buyout of 2002, so once again, I don't know how these things works, if it would have been possible at all. I'm sure there was things behind the scenes when this was going through, but if possible, I would have played nice with Rare to the very end, because I really enjoy their work, and they had a couple really good games in between Melee, and I've decided to represent Perfect Dark with Joanna Dark, and Killer Instinct through Orchid. Joanna was obviously coming from a spiritual successor to GoldenEye 2. Killer Instinct was a little tough because there's some several good choices. You also have Fulgore, you have Jago. Another one I considered was Saberwolf to also sort of represent the Saberman games, or Sabre, or however you're supposed to pronounce it. Any of these characters would have fit great. I just sort of wind up landing on Orchid for right now, as to who I think would have been the coolest rep for Smash. Personally, obviously, this is a biased roster. I do want to give an honorable mention to Conquer, but I figured Conquer came out in 2001, Melee also came out in 2001, and I just thought that was too late for Conquer, unfortunately, especially given that was a new series, at least Perfect Dark. I think that came out in 2000, and at least at that point, it was a spiritual successor to GoldenEye, which came out, I think, in 97, so you had an idea of what to expect, and a fairly decent shot of success. And Killer Instinct obviously existed for a while before then. There's some other noteworthy IP like Battletoads, Jet Force Gemini, Blast Corps that I also kind of considered, but I thought this was the sort of perfect way to cut out the franchises. As for unlockable unique fighters, I went with another rare character. I couldn't resist. Gruntilda. Obviously, Tui was another game that came out between these two entries. Gruntilda's a great character. Banjo's still looking strong, looking like there's a lot of potential in the future. At the time, we didn't quite know the way things would eventually turn out, so I would have went with Gruntilda. I feel like having another Mario character makes sense, at least one newcomer, given just the sheer amount of great characters from that series. I went with Bowser just because, once again, I just thought he would be the coolest addition. I remember as a kid, just seeing that you can play as Bowser was really cool. The last character, once again, I like having surprise, unexpected characters. Sometimes retro, sometimes not. I feel like Game & Watch fit that perfectly, representing a unique era of Nintendo history. So, I don't really have anything to add to that. But there was more newcomers than that. A lot of them, though, had the base of another character, were essentially echoes or clones. 6 in total, which is a lot. Now, as I mentioned last time, I did consider other echoes for the role that would wind up going to GUI, so I feel like some of these other ideas were perfect to get implemented now, so I'll say what they were. One, actually the original idea was for Raichu and Pikachu to sort of represent the evolution side of Pokemon. But since Gold and Silver are out at this point, I decided to go with Pichu. I think Pichu has a little more of a unique design as well. Raichu, I guess in my opinion, just is a little bigger, has a bit of a different tail and ears. Pichu feels like a little more of an overhaul. The other idea I had was for another Fire Emblem character. I did consider Leaf from what would be the latest game at this point, but I actually wound up really liking the idea of Celica for a couple different reasons. Now, it is kind of hard to ignore that. Part of the reason could be is because I really enjoyed the remake of her game. Obviously, that didn't exist at that time, though, but I feel like there's two other good reasons for her inclusion at this point. One being is she is the first female protagonist of the series, which I think is cool to showcase. And another reason, too, is her color scheme, is, at least in the original game, is sort of based off the enemy units. And I just thought that was sort of cool and a nice contrast to Marth. I did also consider Wolf, who was implemented now. Obviously, maybe this is a little bit too much for Star Fox, given it is still kind of a newer series, which is kind of the reason I didn't consider it as much as some of these other Echoes in 64. But at the same time, there's more slots that I really know what to do with, so we're just going to go with it. Another newer series that got an Echo, very similar series to Star Fox, is F-Zero. In fact, Captain Falcon gets 2 Echoes. He gets one from his home series. I went with Black Shadow. Villain, really popular character. Not much else to really say. Really good fit for this role. I decided I really liked the idea of having Mach Rider as an Echo for Captain Falcon. I mean, they're both from kind of racing-ish, vehicle-based games. Similar body types. I think it would also be good to have Mach Rider have an Excite biker alt. So you can sort of represent that as well and have I guess a really cool set of characters that I like from different franchises that all sort of fit together somewhat logically. And the last Echo I went with is giving another character a third iteration, a second Echo, Foreman Spike for Mario. I don't know, I like finding these characters that are kind of from different series. Given Foreman Spike was mainly known for Wrecking Crew. I don't know if he really appeared in too many Mario stuff other than that. But Wrecking Crew can kind of be considered its own thing. Yet it has this connection which makes sense, so I definitely want to take advantage of that. And I think Foreman Spike has, in Wrecking Crew, the same abilities as Mario and Luigi. I haven't played Wrecking Crew in a while. I think Mario and Luigi are both in it, and that Foreman Spike can perform everything they can in that game, so on top of a similar body type, it's not too out of the realm to imagine. So that's the Melee roster. like I said, not a lot of time between these two games, but now we got quite a break between Melee and Brawl with a lot of new series, and of course, the rare buyout's going to really shake some things up. So, yeah, Brawl is going to be interesting.